So anyway, my name's Mikey. What's your name?
Terry Vrijnoek.
Say again?
Terry.
Terry, yeah. What was it? Where are you from?
So I'm from the Netherlands.
Oh, yeah.
And really interested in combining.
Yeah.
So since this isn't sort of an art initiative,
Yeah.
I'm really interested in. I mean, basically every societal movement starts with art, basically.
Yeah.
So I was looking into possibilities or opportunities for genetics, and I don't know, the societal movements we gain from genetics to start with some sort of art form. So that's what I was.
I mean, this is kind of interesting because earlier on it's a shame we still...
Basically to see your DNA as a form of art,
Yeah.
rather than a preventative measure or a diagnostic.
creative material in a way.
Yeah.
Rather than something that's kind of all about kind of very functional.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things earlier on, we had a guy from Pacific Biosciences. Come and have a seat, come and get involved in this. We've got Terry, I'm Mikey, we need more people.
Yeah,
well,
we
we
need
don't.
a discussion.
I mean, these ideas are interesting. Rick, once he's finished doing a bit of art down there in the corner, he's an artist. What is the art approach, and how can you get artists involved in genetics? Is it too complicated for the simple mind of an artist, or?
I know in the Netherlands and probably around the globe there's initiatives of sort of a bioartist working with biological material, and we've had, I mean, I've seen paintings, DNA-based paintings and everything. We can make music out of DNA, but it's all,
The possibilities are there.
yeah, but it doesn't make a shift. It's more of a gimmick rather than a fundamental change in thought. So that's what I'm looking for.
I mean, I guess that's the kind of hope of these people that are, let's say, the bioartists that do these experiments. It's about making the material of DNA or biological systems an art material. But as you say, it's very,
How do you do that as an artist? So whenever, I mean, you do this to create something. What is your starting material, or what is it? I mean, it's probably your head.
For us, we're the people speaking. For us, it's really people, and people with, their minds. So in that sense, our material is actually the thoughts and the imagination, the collective imagination of people. But in a way, you can say the same thing about genetic material. That is a kind of collective material. By and large, people have got similar DNA, but it's not the problem with that material is it's very, very small, very hard
You
to
can't see
understand,
it.
and very difficult to manipulate as well.
Yeah.
Let's get these people to come and have a seat on the table of chat. My name's Mike, we've got Terry here. What's your name? What is it?
Elnas.
Elnas.
Yes.
Come and have a seat. At the moment we're talking about arts and genetics. Can an artistic approach actually benefit the culture of genetics, or the actual science of genetics and genomics as well, for that matter? Or is it just too difficult to actually involve in arts? What do you think about that? I mean, your family are all artists, aren't they, Terry?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you're some kind of...
In between.
You're a genetic person.
Yeah, I was trained as a geneticist.
Yeah, okay, so you're a geneticist.
But I'm
You
really.
see this possibility
Yeah.
of a kind of artistic interpretation.
Well, even sometimes in the lab we create art.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe not always visual,
Yeah.
but when I'm in the lab, or when I see my colleagues in the lab, and even behind the computers, they're creating some piece of art, although they're searching probably for a cause for disease.
Yeah. So
But it's
in your mind,
their search, their
it's an artistic process.
yeah.
Okay, so we've got Terry, we've got Elnas and Steve.
Steve, well remembered.
We're talking about art. Has
Okay.
art got a place in genetics, and is it? Terry actually sees himself. He's a geneticist, but he's a kind of artist as well.
Okay.
Just because of the creative power and expression of what. Come and have a seat. Are you an artist, a geneticist, or just a general punter? Do you see yourself as an artist? Oh, it's too late. It's gone. We scared him. We scared him. We scared him. Do you see yourself as an artist?
Yes, of course. I love art. I love any type of art, drawing. I love going to museums, and I think there is art everywhere. Of course, there is also in science. So, yeah.
I mean, can genes be a kind of material for art?
Of course, of course.
So yes, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt.
So for you two, I think it's obvious. I wonder if is it obvious to you?
Look at my face. No, no.
No, you don't think so?
Well, no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what.
What do you actually do? What's your...
So I'm a project manager for the NHS, so I'm leading for Genomics for Greater Manchester in modernising the tissue pathway.
Is that a creative practice, do you think?
Creative, yeah, not artistic, I wouldn't have said.
And is
yeah.
art a way, because one of the things we were talking early on, we were talking about how do we get this kind of understanding, this trust, and this just awareness of genomics out there. Could art be the way to do it? Or artistic interventions a way to sort of understand how all of this stuff works? Or do you think that's just
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have a clue. Well, I wouldn't know what the first step for that would look like.
How would you start? How would we even start?
Well, what I noticed in the plenary this morning as well is that the focus is very much on let's say achieving stuff, creating solutions, while most of the things that happen in society are based on feeling or how we feel attached to it.
Kind of playfulness.
Yeah. So rather than trying to find evidence or trying to create evidence, we may want to create some sort of attachment to our DNA.
Okay, so are we too much involved in sort of results and not enough about the playfulness, playing with genetics? I'm trying to understand in a more kind of, in a way, a more human or a more artistic way to understand the material of genes. What do you think about that, Elnas? Have you got a view? You could be more playful, or they're barriers, obstacles to that?
I don't really think there are obstacles because there are so many techniques and methods where if you look at it in a different way, it's kind of art. Whatever the results you obtain, especially when you're using fluorescence or other dyes, the results you're obtaining is art.
So in a way, you know, one of the things is about how you look at things, and looking at things in a different way just requires a change of perspective. It doesn't require any other sort of, you know, effort than just looking at things in a different way. And maybe that's something that we could be doing more in this field.
But that's what artists do, right? They change the perspective, or they try to change the perspective of whatever happens in society. And so, for genetics, I think the perspective is indeed in one direction, and that is prevention or health or helping people out. And maybe with a piece of art or several pieces of art, we could change that perspective a little bit and broaden it a little bit.
That's really interesting. What can you bring in this person? What's your name?
Rick.
Rick, we got Terry, we got Elnas. Are you off?
It was nice to meet you. No, it's fine.
What's the final thought on this? Do you think it's a good idea what Terry's saying?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And would you be willing to experiment artistically?
Definitely. If I will have the opportunity, I will.
Okay.
I'm a student, so I'm still at the beginning.
But as a student, surely you've got more chance to experiment and play, look at things differently.
I don't know. I'll try, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I will definitely try.
You will try. Okay, well,
Thank you.
we'll watch this space and see what happens.
Thank you.
What do you think, Rick?
I'm sorry, I was half listening from the top.
Basically, what Terry's saying is, here it's all about, you know, saving people from cancer or health, massive health benefits. It's very functional, it's very outcome based. But could we benefit actually from a more artistic approach to genetics, where you're actually just kind of more playing with the materials and playing with the I don't exactly know how, because I don't know probably enough about
I don't know.
it. But just the concept What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, you kind of need a bit of both, really, because obviously you need to still be doing the saving of lives, but you do need to sort of think of different ways of, I guess, approaching the issues, the problems and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know enough about it. That's the thing. Sorry.
Are you an artist?
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Tell us about what you do, yeah, and then we can modify your hardware.
God, I'm not in my frame.
We can even have a look at some of your work.
Well, it's about the human body and stuff, I guess, in a way, and it's like modifying images of the human body and sort of twisting it.
And modifying the human body.
Yeah. But more it's like playing with shapes and stuff.
Hasn't that got a direct connection to genetics, what you're actually doing?
Possibly, yeah. I guess so. To some extent.
I mean, is it something that you could look into? Could you translate what you do as an image into a kind of genetic function? You've got your laptop there, let's have a look at some of your images and we'll go from there.
No.
Harry doesn't know what you're talking about, so let's
do it later. No.
Let's see some of your work, because I think that's only fair.
No, that's alright. It's alright.
We're discussing.
That's alright. No.
Can you at least tell us a little bit what you're trying to do with the picture?
Just messing around with shapes with the body and stuff. So it's normally like sort of making it sort of sexually ambiguous. It's normally my own body, but it's normally making sexually ambiguous fit forms. Sometimes sexual, sometimes just kind of blobs. In a way. No, honestly, it's no.
I would like to see it.
No, that's what I say. That's what I say.
I think it's very good art, but I personally think, although it's not really about my opinion, but I think that there is a direct connection with genetics, because you're mutating the human body.
So when I talk about my work at birthday parties, and I don't bring my work, but I talk about it.
Have you not got like a picture? Because I always get my phone out and just show them a picture of this table.
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to just show a picture with A's, T's, C's and G's, and that's basically what DNA is. But I talk about also my own DNA, and then they get fascinated about, okay, what can you see in it, and how...
It's more personal.
Yeah, exactly. So what is the response to your work if you put it on exposition, or if you talk about it? How do people respond?
Depends who it is, to be honest. Some people are sort of disgusted, some people are intrigued. Yeah, I guess, yeah. Some people, don't bat an eyelid kind of thing. But yeah, most of the time people are kind of intrigued, I think.
How does it go with you when you tell people what you're doing at a party? Do they... you just kind of...
It depends on the party. Depends on the party.
You do something else?
I sometimes pretend to do something else. Actually, when people ask what do you do, I have to gauge what to say. Yeah, exactly. Some people don't really get art as well. So I mean, I do like video editing, and I do graphic design as well. So I just sort of go with that, because people go like, oh, art, watercolors.
Okay, so Steve was on a phone call. We'll have to fill you in on the discussion as it's gone in the meantime. So we found out Rick's an artist, and he, as an artistic practice, just kind of visually, he mutates and distorts the form of the human body. Okay. But and you don't necessarily. Some people think it's kind of, in a way, it's similar to probably what the geneticists get. Some people think it's disgusting. Some people think, wow. So, but then this other question's come up. It's like, is it easy to explain what you do to people at a party? What do you say to people, or do you just go tell them like you do something else?
So it depends on whether or not they have NHS or
One question in between. Do people generally in the UK know what the NHS is? Okay.
So there's variability of understanding. I think most people, unless they're actually involved in the NHS, think the NHS is just one big organisation and don't realise that it's split up into lots of different trusts and bodies. I say that my job is, if if they haven't got NHS or any form of medical experience, it'd be something like genomics is a new way to treat cancer, and it's a developing field. My job is to support the system of Greater Manchester to improve and modernise that, because the future is huge and we're not ready for it yet.
It sounds like you've had a lot of practice with that.
Trying to work out how to turn it into
So if I get cancer, you're going to cure me?
I'm not. But
People at parties, do they kind of say things like, oh, you know, my friend's got cancer, you're gonna...
So I'm only 6 months in post. This is my first role within genomics or related fields, but my previous 4 years were with Cancer Research UK, and that always triggered the well, they're hiding the cure, or well, you know, weed cures cancer, or whatever.
I mean, where do we want to go with this? There's so many different ways that because earlier on we were actually talking about the paranoia about, you know, what people call the cancer industry. We could go down that road. We can talk about how do we explain what we do to people at parties. We could talk about the creativity or art. We could have a look at some of Rick's pictures, even though he's really... Rick, if you're going to promote your art, you've got to show people your work. These people won't be shocked. They mutate people for a living. They're not going to be shocked by you know. Anyway, it's up to you. The whole point of Talkaoke is your decision. Where do you want to go with this? Do you want to talk which?
So you're a geneticist?
Yes.
And so specifically, what does that entail?
Sorry, specifically what?
What do you actually do apart from the art side?
Well, what I say to people is that most of the time I study my own DNA. So I'm in a genetics lab, looking at my own DNA to find stuff that are relevant for me as a healthy person rather than a patient or a potential patient.
What kind of things are relevant to a healthy person?
Well, I don't know yet. So that's exactly what I'm trying to find out. So preventative, you could see all sorts of opportunities, but we're not there yet. And I think that eventually prevention is not the power of the genome. I discussed it with a colleague. It could be something to do with the identity that we have. So if we compare our genomes to others, then we could get some sort of value out of that in a form of that DNA is mine and that other's DNA.
DNA pride in a way.
Perhaps. So this is a bit left field. So does further understanding of our variation from one another genetically increase nationalism and racism, and is that a risk?
It's funny because I've just come from the talk about race, and that race doesn't really exist. So what you would actually want to do is the opposite, of course, is to create understanding of what variation actually means or could mean, or how we interpret it. So that's the direction I'm heading for. So sometimes
So in a way it's a different identity to the kind of, let's say, group identity of race or nation.
Yeah. So what I often find striking, I've got students regularly studying my genome without knowing that it's my genome, and then they have to, so I give them an assignment to basically play doctor at the end of the week and to come up with some sort of advice based on the data that they've studied. And they are all fine throughout the week or throughout the months of studying the data, but then as soon as the person steps in, comes into the room, it all of a sudden becomes a person.
Come and have a seat. Yes, come and have your sandwich here. We've got Steve, we've got Terry, we've got Rick, and Mikey. What's your name?
Olga.
What's it?
My name is Olga.
Olga. Oh, come and have a seat. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. At the moment, we're kind of talking about, in a way, a more playful approach to genetics, or a less kind of outcome-based. Terry's almost like a genetic artist, where he encourages his students to kind of come up with ideas based on his DNA that are not necessarily about health but more about kind of who Terry is as a person. We've got Rick over here who's an artist, and Steve over here that doesn't really get art, and he's like organising Genomics for Manchester, so quite a mixed bunch of people. And I guess what we're talking about at the moment is, can actually is your genetic identity important, or is it something that you should be kind of almost proud of or find some value in, or is it something that we should be burying as not important to the person, and other things are important to our identity? That's really the question on the table at the moment. I mean, would you be proud of your
no, I don't. No, you can't have proud in something that you had no hand in. You just what you were given.
Okay. But can we be proud of anything then?
Things you've accomplished. It's nature or nurture, right? So how much is predisposed in your genetic makeup? Hopefully, you'll find out for you. So how much of what we're able to understand currently about your genome is informing that nature-nurture conversation? How much is a predisposition towards, IQ, EQ? I don't know. All of the variabilities of being a person. How much is how you were brought up, and how much can you find in that petri dish when your students are looking at your genome?
Okay. We're getting very philosophical here.
Yeah. We don't want to go that way.
Oh, no, definitely not. Definitely not. But
that's the thing. So I'm being a little bit vague because I don't know what I'm looking for. But
kind of exploring.
Yeah. So what I also see, for example, in the cancer community, but I mostly work with patients with rare diseases. You see that they get a lot of support from being part of a group still that is based on their genetic identity. It doesn't make them really proud, so to say.
Because it's based on a disease.
But there's some sort of connection that is probably in the first place disease-based, but then, especially for the rare disease patient, when they found their cause, it's based on that mutation, which I find intriguing. Don't know what to do with it, but I always then try to put it into a different perspective, because these are patients. Can we do a similar thing for healthy individuals?
That's true for cancer patients too. So I heard a young guy talk about a very rare form of cancer, who had spent years on that diagnostic odyssey, and once he'd found his diagnosis, I think he said there was something like 10 people globally that had the same cancer, but once he found them, they were able to compare notes about symptoms and about treatment plans, and just understanding from each other about, it's not, other people, the other 9 people that have what I've got also went through these stages, and it was really profoundly useful for his well-being overall. So it's not a trivial thing.
Okay. So you can get a lot of solace from having this identity and the other people that share that identity. Do you have to be a cancer sufferer to have that, or could it?
Privilege, so to say.
Do you ever think about your genetic identity, Rick?
I guess to some extent, yeah. But
is it something you're proud of?
well, it's, I guess I don't want to be not proud of it. I guess, yeah. So yeah, got to embrace it to some extent, yeah.
So you embrace it. What about you, Olga?
No, definitely I can't say that I'm specifically proud of my genetic identity. It's just something that I got by default from my parents.
Do you seek out people that are genetically similar to you?
Well, I've done genetic testing to trace my ancestry, and that was really interesting to get more insights into my roots.
What did you discover?
I discovered that I've got some relatives in Finland or Greece.
Right.
Planned a trip there.
Right.
That's practically as far as I go. So I got a message from one of my 5th cousins who lives in London as a suggestion to meet up for a cup of coffee,
Right.
which I'm going to do. That was fun. Yeah.
Is that going to be like over the next couple of days, because you can come back and find out?
We're meeting next week.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm excited. I'm excited. No, I think we're just sharing a tiny piece of chromosome 12, so I don't think we will. Well, it's fun anyway. Yes, definitely. Yeah, we can try to see what's going on. Apart from that, I think a person can be proud of what they have achieved, but not necessarily. Yeah.
without going too personal, but do you feel more connected then to that person, even though if you would have come across them on Twitter, it would have been just another tweeter, and now it's somehow family?
Yeah, we'll find out. Yeah.
You'll have to tweet us back and find out how that goes. But I mean, sometimes when you meet, you do go and seek out, like, not necessarily fifth cousins, but a second cousin or something like that, and you feel that connection. I think there's a little bit of people are a little bit reluctant to go down this genetic route because of the implications, I guess, about racism or about this kind of genetic determinism, that nobody really wants to go down that route. But at the same time, as you say, there's something there. Maybe there is a language to be developed which is a little bit less kind of scary in a way. I mean, what do other people think? Do you think, can it ever be something that's just a bit more fun and not as scary to say, oh, I'm proud of my genes?
Maybe. Again, if it's with more understanding, then you wouldn't have to segment. If you wouldn't have to segment yourself by something as awful and contentious as racism, then you could segment it by chromosome 23 or whatever. Here's my chromosome 23 buddies, and maybe 12 rather 23.
I mean, if it's something esoteric and weird, like maybe the shape of your ear or something like that, or do you think in the end people will start judging you by the shape of your ear? Whether because there's a thing, some people have got like the different lobes.
It's different. So now you're trying to connect again the characteristics in our genome to the physical characteristics, and what you've just explained is the mere potential of sharing a bit of genome makes you connected. I mean, I think that's far more, or that could be a stronger, if we focus on that, if we interpret it in such a way, it could be a stronger trademark than the shape of your ear.
Why would it be stronger? Because it's much more...
It feels like family, right? Or not?
Yeah.
Not like family, close family, brothers and sisters, but it feels you fly to Greece to have a cup of coffee.
No, I'm not flying. No. Just exactly. I'm staying in London. I don't think I would fly. True. Yeah, true.
How far are you going? Is it a different...
Or it's just going to zone 1. Yeah, that's an effort to get from zone 2 to zone 1.
So you're at least spending some money on it.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So it's not nothing. It's something. You're actually going...
There's a kind of poetry in that, if you want to bring it back to that art.
Yeah.
There's a kind of poetry and beauty in that, isn't there? Finding that commonality in each other.
Yeah.
So.
But in a way, we could find we've got common genes with everyone here in this room. If we all had gone and got our genome sequence, we could find a little stretch that's the same. I'm sure.
More than a little stretch. I mean, it makes us human. I just heard that we are among the least, or among the species that have the least variation in our genome. So the larger part of our genome of our DNA makes us human, but it's the differences that we focus on now. I think, for the disease and for the prevention and everything.
The logical endpoint of this argument that you can have a cup of coffee with anybody in the room because you share some DNA.
Yeah, and then it's pretty random.
Have you ever sorted out have you ever got your DNA tested?
No, not yet.
For genealogy?
Not yet, no.
Would you be interested?
I guess so, yeah. Be interested to see the results, yeah.
Was it surprising the results came out?
Nothing really surprising. No. Nothing that I wouldn't expect. I was just happy to see how precise it is in predicting the area that I'm coming from. But also a couple of interesting facts that
Have you ever considered getting this done, Steve?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting just to see kind of, I suppose the kind of the genealogy and how far back they can identify where you're from. It'd be really interesting. Yeah.
And is it partly because you've had your whole genome sequence. have you done a kind of genealogical, whatever you call it?
Yeah, I'm all Dutch, like as Dutch as I can be. So I've yeah, yes, yeah, and it's even regional, so it's circled around Rotterdam, and it's there was no surprise whatsoever there.
In a way, that's a surprise.
Well, it is because most of my most of my friends and colleagues who've done it, they see a dispersed field, and with me, it's just one big blob.
And I guess one of the points, because we started off this whole conversation talking about the genes as material, as artistic material, but it's material you can't really change very easily. So you're kind of stuck with what you've got. You're stuck with your fifth cousin in London and your third cousin in Greece and Finland, and you can't do anything about it. It's not dynamic. It's not, you can't choose it in a way. I think that's the other problem with it. Because I'm sure you would choose a bit different. Not anything against Rotterdam.
Okay, question back. If you would have the option to choose, would you use that option?
What would you choose? Maybe we could go around the table.
Can you?
Yeah.
Would you?
I mean, in a way.
What direction would you be looking for?
Well, I would definitely, because I'm very, very short-sighted, so I'd definitely try and edit out those genes for short-sighted.
Yes.
Maybe a few more genes for like witticism. Because I need that, and try and edit out the pun gene as well, because I recognize I'm always doing. I haven't done any today. It's because I'm tired, but normally there's a lot of puns come through. So I definitely would get rid of that for sure. It's more. I think that's the thing. It's more about what you get rid of rather than what you would add.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to remove from your genetic code?
Baldness?
Yeah.
Yeah, get rid of that quite happily, yeah.
I don't think so. I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, genetically flawless.
No. No way, but when you are removing something, there's always a risk that you will remove something useful together with the thing that you don't want, so and introduce a couple of errors in your code, so I wouldn't take the risk.
I mean, anyone who's tried to fix Windows operating system knows all about that, because you go, oh, this file's 48 gigabytes, I'm going to get rid of it. And then, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, you're right. We don't know what it does, so we can't really remove that short-sightedness gene. Maybe.
Your eyes together with your.
Yeah, exactly. It might. Yeah.
That would remove the short-sightedness, but.
Exactly. So we're playing with the forces of nature we don't properly understand. Is there anything you can get rid of?
No, I agree. Just you change one thing, you start changing other things, and
I mean, there's without going into it too much, there's certain genes that you maybe share with Steve. Would you consider what he's considered re-editing his whole?
When I was thinking of shaving my head, but I'm quite happy now with it like this. Yeah, so exactly. But I wouldn't have experienced that unless I just was losing my hair. So.
Yeah.
I would have got rid of that before it would have, if I could have got rid of it, I would have got rid of it, but now I'm quite happy to have a shaved head, so if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a process, I suppose. I mean, in a way, it's coming to terms with who we are and what is in our genes.
So rather than radically changing anything, I see my DNA as a resource, as an information resource. If without any sort of deterministic information, but an information source that you can use to guide you through decisions. And by that, I don't mean that I know for certain that I will get a heart attack at 45 and have to do, I don't know, blood thinners before that, but just get an idea of what is in my genome. And I don't know, take an extra cup of coffee or not, or just decide to do that. So not all in the form of prevention, but just be able to make decisions based on that.
if you want another cup of coffee, just go for it. You don't need a genetic excuse.
And I need a lunch as well. So thank you very much.
Is that your genes telling you that? I mean, I would definitely go for. I would go for gene. I mean, that's another whole the microbiome in our guts and the genetic code there. It's another whole story for the next session maybe. But hang on. I want a final thought from each of you before you go. So I've got some sense of closure for this session. So Olga, have you got?
Not really. Well.
What about this question that Terry sort of started the conversation with?
I wasn't there when you started the conversation.
Which is like, could we be more playful or more kind of artistic with our understanding of genetics rather than this very functional approach? And what would that mean?
I'm not sure about it because I wouldn't play with such serious matters as the genome. Yeah.
It's too serious.
It's too serious to play with. Yeah, that's my approach. But I'm biased because I'm a scientist. So I'm biased because I'm a scientist, not an artist. You know.
But you're not doing it. Is that not a kind of art practice?
I don't take it as art. No.
What do you research?
Cardiovascular diseases. Molecular signatures of cardiovascular diseases such as heart failure. So yeah.
Too serious.
I'm too serious. Yeah.
Well, I'm a scientist too, but I'm also an artist. So I would like to continue to close off as a closing remark. I hope I can continue and even expand my sort of artistic performance in the lab.
I mean, what about this question before you go about the seriousness? Are genes too serious a subject to be a matter for art?
They are a serious matter, especially when you consider them in the context of disease. But I think the only way to be able to deal with that is to upfront, before you get ill, be able to get acquainted with it a little bit more than we do now. And the only way to do that is to experience it.
Yeah.
So it's a shock if you get involved with your DNA as soon as you get sick or ill.
Yeah. You should know it beforehand.
But if you're a little bit more acquainted with the ins and outs of your DNA, then the shock may be a little bit less. I hope.
I mean, I don't normally give my own opinion, but I do think that art can also deal with very serious matters. The best art, I think, is serious. Even though even yesterday we were talking about youth violence in East London, which is a very serious matter, but we took an artistic approach to it in order to get new ideas, because if we were just like very solemn about it, we would never be able to move on in those discussions. So I think art can deal with serious matters if it's done in the right way. Rick, final thought?
No, just add to that, yes. So I think some of the performances yesterday were although serious, they kind of also helped people sort of understand what people were going through.
Yeah.
In dealing with the problems. So that was, in a way, a creative way of looking at the issue.
In a way, we could do the same thing here. If we had performances, if we had artistic interpretations of some of these areas of research, I think it would help us to move around the issue and not just go head on completely. So I think there's definitely food for thought there, but you need food for thinking and a coffee. Thank you very much. We're here all day, so come back later on and see what the discussion's about. Thanks for joining in, good luck in your researches.
I'm Johnny.
And
Anne-Marie.
Yep.
Zara.
Yeah. No, can we make up a name?
My name is Riham.
Riham. Okay. And
Dave.
And I'm Mikey. Come and join in if you want to. This is Talkaoke Freeform Talk Show. We don't know what the subject's going to be yet, but we're going to find out. Anyone got any suggestions? What to talk about?
Common icebreaker is, how do you feel about pineapple on pizza?
Pineapple on pizza? That is actually quite common.
I love pineapple on pizza. Pineapple on pizza is amazing. It's good, yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason people don't like it is because the way it's like on the media is like, oh, it's not nice, but actually it's really good.
Okay, so it's kind of like tradition versus reality in a
Yeah.
way. Okay, pineapple on pizza?
I've never tried it, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I think it just depends. Sometimes I'm like yes for it, and
Yeah.
I'm like no, just stay away. That's just an exotic thing. Just like, I like my margarita.
Okay, you're definitely a margarita sort of person. Margarita pineapples. How do you like your pizza?
Normal, classic.
What's that?
Classic, normal margarita.
Classic normal. Sorry, I can't hear you from over there. Come closer, come closer.
It was time to like take a video.
Okay, well, yeah. We'll draw you in later on. Pineapple on pizza?
No,
No?
no, I don't like. I'm sorry. I'm not meaning to offend anyone. I think we can all like get together and eat the set of pizzas with different toppings,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I just don't like fruit on savoury things.
Why?
I don't know.
Is it, you think it's genetic?
Don't know. What do you think, Mikey?
This is my brother. I like pineapple on pizza. I mean, it's not a problem to me. I don't. So maybe it's. I don't know. Maybe we just inherited different genes. What do you think about it? I mean, I mean, earlier on, just now, we had a different conversation, which is about our identity. How much of our identity is actually related to genes? You've got two people here with similar genes, and one likes pineapple on the pizza, the other one has got some weird hang-up about it. So, what is that about? How does this identity develop? This is the question. Any thoughts?
So I know. I think we get like dealt like a set of cards when we're born, like our DNA.
Yeah.
But because of the human brain and like maybe epigenetics, we
Yeah.
can overcome some of those barriers, but they're not always barriers. Sometimes,
Okay.
like
Are there even barriers? And is it epigenetic, the fact that I like pineapple and you don't? Could it be an epigenetic thing? You're sort of nodding.
It could be. Or it could be nothing to do with genes at all.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Okay.
You'd have to have a look at lots of different people. I think you'd have to
Yeah.
look at large numbers to see if
I
it's
mean, would
genetic.
people be willing to submit their DNA into this study to find out why people like pineapple?
Well, you know, if you go to like a company like 23andMe,
Yeah.
they've got tons of data on people's genes.
Yeah.
So the question is, and they give, I think they do questionnaires. So the question is whether they had a pineapple box to tick on that
Right,
questionnaire.
okay. It depends how much money they've got from Pizza Hut, I suppose, doesn't it? I don't know. I mean, what do people think? How much of your identity is based on your genes? How much is based on... what else could it be based on apart from genes? Thanks for the photos. Any thoughts?
I think initially it is
Yeah.
your genes, but the more you grow, the more impressionable you are. So
Yeah.
things do change
Yeah.
per person. So I do think basics,
Yeah.
when you're little, it is more genetic.
Yeah.
Genetically
Has your
grown.
identity changed since you were a kid?
Certain things, like I never used to like pineapple on pizza.
Yeah.
Now I do.
Right, okay.
Things like
moving
that.
Sort of like spinning it out from the
But
pizza?
yeah, I think you do. Everybody changes.
Yeah.
Your identity does change. The older you get, the more wiser you get.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So yeah, I do think
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
I think that actually, I mean, I'm kind of interested in aging, and I'm talking about aging tomorrow.
Yeah. You're doing a talk here?
I'm giving a talk tomorrow.
Where and when?
I think it's the live lounge at 3 o'clock on
Okay.
aging and
Yeah.
genomics and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, just from personal experience,
Yeah.
that you do change with age, you know, and sometimes a lot of it is actually not worrying about. When you're young, sometimes you worry about a lot of things or have like very strong opinions about things.
Yeah.
And then when you get older,
You can't be bothered, really.
well, you realise it's not that important, or you
Yeah.
know, other things change. So you do definitely change with age. The question is whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I think it's quite interesting. The thing I've been interested in recently is about culture,
Yeah.
and how culture isn't so much about bringing things on; it's about rejecting things.
Yeah.
So having a culture,
Yeah.
having a culture is not a shared like of something; it's a shared dislike of something.
Really?
Yeah. So certain people might like when I was young, a lot of people wouldn't like certain sorts of music,
Yeah.
or they wouldn't like instant coffee. or something like that, and or they wouldn't like certain football teams other than their own.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the culture that brought them together. Was actually I think there's a rejection of stuff rather than an acceptance of stuff.
Right.
That's just an idea that I've recently thought about. So, but I think it's related to aging because those things kind of change with age.
So then you can't be bothered to dislike instant coffee or football.
Yeah, you change, your priorities change, or you understand things that aren't. You understand things. You get better understanding, so you realise that some things that you thought were important actually aren't, or they're just cultural things. They're just things that don't really matter. Like pineapple on pizza. You know, I would eat pineapple on pizza if I had to. Just I wouldn't if I given the choice.
You wouldn't pick it. Say I gave you a pizza now with pineapple in it, would you pick it off? Or
I would actually. Yeah.
You would. Okay.
but if they were kind of like super glued on and I couldn't do that, I would still eat it. Yeah.
You still eat the pizza.
I'm not sure about the super glue. But yeah.
Okay, so we're talking. What do people think on this side? Is identity all about rejecting things rather than?
I would personally disagree. For me, like identity is more of like Anne-Marie was saying, it's more about what you're starting to accept. The older you grow, you're more impressionable. So especially with young children, you'll see them adapting things their parents would do. Eventually, as they grow older, they probably do the same thing because that's what they've seen going on. But the older you get, hopefully you get wiser, but it's not for culture, just to point on that point. Culture could be also something you all agree on, not necessarily dislike. Yes, it could be dislike, but we could all agree on a particular thing, like people that like football, that's like the football culture, or people that like knitting and crocheting, that's another culture. Like, it's very strong community that could be formed from something you like. It's the same, you like something, you hate something, but it's more of like, is that genes? Like, was I born to like knitting? Was I born to like football? I don't necessarily think, I think that's just the perspective in which you are. I think that's more of the environment you are in, or things that have influenced you as you grew older. So that's my take on it. So.
Okay, what do other people think? I mean, how do our cultures form? How do identities form? How much, if any, is genetic?
No, I would say none of it's genetic. Because I think culture is a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really have any more to add on that. But
give us an example, like, just so we've got something to chew on.
Like, the way we see, some cultures see things as clean or unclean.
Right.
I guess, like, from an evolutionary perspective, you wouldn't want to be in an environment that's very unclean because that leads to disease. But
so there's a certain kind of almost like innate dislike of unclean things.
But where cultures define where that is, like in Saudi Arabia, dogs are pork, so pigs are unclean. Yeah. But here in the UK, it's not really looked down upon.
Right. I mean, I think what I'm picking up from that is like the idea of clean or unclean is something innate and possibly genetic, but the way that's interpreted is different from culture to culture. That seems to be what you're saying. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're probably right now. So, for example, I think like, we talk about football. Well, obviously, football's not an evolutionary selected thing because it's kind of recent invention. Yeah. But there's a kind of like tribalism about supporting a football team that might be a kind of evolved.
Do you think the tribalism could be genetic?
Yeah, there's something. Yeah, there's something evolved about that. I think it's like a kind of common thing across all of kind of humanity, isn't it, to a certain extent? So
tribalism.
Yeah, sort of tribalism. Depends on how you define that. But do you know what I mean? The idea of a kind of common group, a group identity. That's probably like something that is an evolved characteristic of humans. Yeah, I mean, at some level. But I mean, how it's expressed. We're always going to have this tribalism. We won't ever. Will we evolve out of it to something a bit more? No, I think you can. I think it doesn't mean that we all have to like kill each other. I think we can be tribal and also be friendly across. So I suppose we can adapt. But that's not an evolutionary thing because that's happening at a much faster rate than evolution can happen. So that's just us working out ways to deal with that. But the underlying, innate nature of humanity. I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's almost impossible to like pull apart from from cultural stuff, but there probably is something there. I suppose the question was, would there be variants? Would there be polymorphisms, variants that make some people more tribal than others?
Okay.
That would be an interesting thing.
Okay, what do people think? Are we just almost naturally tribalistic? But is that necessarily a bad thing? Will we evolve out of it one way or another? Do we want to evolve out of it? These are some of the questions. Sylvester, come and get involved in this.
I believe that the idea of tribes have come from an evolutionary point of view in which we're trying to survive and increase our chances of survival. It's just more commonly back in the day, I say, but I wasn't born obviously, but like if you were in a group, somebody could do the hunting, somebody could do the... So it was more of like, if you're in a group, you're more likely to survive. Right. We are forming a tribe based on this common agreement. If there's another tribe, they're going to want our things and we don't want it. So I think the idea of the tribalism comes from the idea of wanting to survive. So we always want to survive, you know. So I think the idea of tribalism would not go away because there is still that want and need for humans to survive.
Yeah, so it's going to be within us. But as David says, could it actually be morphed into something that's a bit more positive and a bit less aggressive, definitely?
I think it's more evolved already. It's not really about trying to survive anymore. We're social creatures. It's more about socialising and interacting with others.
So what are the tribes now? Are you in any tribes?
Technically, I come from a Zulu tribe.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, do you feel part of that tribe?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, like if I go back home to Zambia,
where is that?
Southern Africa in Zambia.
Right.
So
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Definitely.
Okay. But I mean, how does that play out in London?
You still, even in London, loads of people from different tribes, similar tribes, will still try and get together, but it's more of a social thing, obviously, than a survival thing. Yeah. It's more just you knowing, people understanding your culture and things like that, having a baseline to touch upon.
Do you feel part of a tribe?
I'm not part of a tribe, but I personally feel like it depends, like the origin of the tribe, there's always a lot more going on there, but like for example in the UK it kind of dilutes itself because it's just London is very multicultural as well, so even if you do get them together like different tribes, it's just, as you said, it's like a social thing. It's hardly like about the tribe anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what Dave's trying to say is that the idea of tribes moved on, so it doesn't necessarily need to be like an ethnic tribe. It could be a tribe of, let's say, Tottenham Hotspur supporters or something like that. Or
that's what I mean. It's tribes are becoming social things. They're not for just survival. They're evolving.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree, like in school, we had the phrase like "one tribe, be kind." So
what is it? One tribe, be kind.
Yeah, it's all that like fuzzy warm, get along with each other.
But kind of saying that we're all part of one big tribe.
Yeah, so that like essentially probably the whole world will become one tribe because you see what's happening with like the United Nations.
So you think that's the inevitable thing, that we'll become just one tribe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be the end goal. Unity.
One single global tribe. Do you buy it? Would you like to see it happen?
Yeah, of course. It'd be great to have like everyone working together. But I think people, it's not necessarily like people kind of naturally relate and work in groups of smaller sizes than millions of people. You know, I mean, I think the numbers of people that we have now, it's just so immense. It's hard to really conceptualize. So, and people, people like to kind of think of them in smaller groups. You know.
Do you see yourself as part of a tribe? And what would
not really. I can't really identify with a tribe. I mean, I do see that I have the groups, like we have a group of people that work together, like in a research group, you know. Yeah. That's kind of like a kind of family. Aging.
So you're like the aging tribe.
Well,
you're not really a tribe though.
Well, I mean, you could say that. I used to be, strongly involved in the British Society for Research on Aging. That's probably about.
So you're the chief of the aging tribe?
No. I'm not anymore, or not even. I never was really the chief, but I was like at one point one of the kind of elders, or something like
elders
that.
Elders of the aging tribe.
So, you know, and there was like a kind of group of people that knew each other and sort of worked together, but they also all competed with each other as well. So there's always that kind of internal competition within the group. So I don't know. I don't think we really have tribes in the way, because of the way that it's the way how things are structured, you know. So even though I live quite close to where I work, it's still a few miles away. So there's a completely different sort of community around where I live to where I work. Whereas I think in the old days, you kind of work and live all in the same group of people.
In your little farm. Come and have a seat on the table of chat. We're talking about that. In a way, it started off with the genetics of identity, but now we're talking about tribalism. And are we kind of genetically predisposed to have our tribes? Most people say yes, we are, but it could be a friendly tribe, such as what were the tribes that we came up with?
It was just more about the tribes are evolving. It used to be about, you know, surviving and things like that, and now it's more of a social.
But in a way, that's
that's
still with us as a kind of.
It was genetically
as a kind of
predisposition.
Is it an innate thing to be part of a tribe? David over here says it is, but he's not part of a tribe somehow, apart from maybe the aging tribe, because he's an aging researcher. Anyway, let's quickly get some names. My name's Mikey, this is David. What was your name?
I'm Reham.
Reham, and sorry, I forgot.
Zara.
And Marie.
And
Johnny.
Was it?
Johnny.
Johnny, and
my name is Robin.
Robin.
Yes.
I mean, do you feel part of a tribe? And if so, is it a...
Well, definitely not a genetic tribe.
No.
So, I mean, I do definitely feel connected to certain, let's say, social environments, but I do feel that they are at least not coupled to anything where I would initially say what unites us is a genetic predisposition besides being human.
No, I mean, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that all humans want to be in a tribe or see themselves in a tribal way, but now it's become about something a bit abstract rather than an actual kind of kin group or family group.
So the question is rather if it is genetically predisposed that we belong, or that we have a feeling belonging to a tribe. Now I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, tough question. I mean, definitely I would say that we have genetically a predisposition to, let's say, have a need for social connection, and originally I would say this would entail a, let's say, social group that is not digital and therefore rather small, which you could call a tribe.
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe it's happening more on social media now that we're kind of like these, you know, we connect that way and we form our... I mean, Johnny was saying that in a way the end goal is like a global tribe where we're all part of the same tribe, but somehow we've got this tribal value. Maybe you want to say a bit more about that? Well, I mean, this was something that's in your school.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Like, I think it came from a video from online, and where I don't really remember what the video was about, but they like the theme for the year was the One Tribe Be Kind. So they did a photo shoot where like we were all being really friendly, and, like groups of friends.
So what? I mean, you weren't that kind of naturally friendly.
No.
Can we get involved in this? This is Talkaoke. In a way, we're talking about how our identity kind of forms our. You know, is it genetic? Is it something else? What? Do we even need an identity anymore?
Now, though, we just like it's like naturally you find it easier to be friends or like be in a tribe with people who are like you, like-minded people. So you like at first you naturally form those groups because you tend to stay away from people who you like. Have like judged to be challenging towards you or whatever.
Okay, so in a way you kind of congregate with groups that have got the same values.
So in that way it's not based on your genes, it's just like like psychology, I guess.
So
sociology.
So is it mostly a sociological thing then, this kind of tribalism? Is it, how genetic is it? Robin, have you got any views on this? Not really, no.
Not new ones.
Not new ones. Yeah. Well, it's in a way we're trying to develop this conversation and sort of see what where it leads us in terms of like the new thinking.
in your experience, Mikey, because in a way this table with about how many 10 chairs or something.
Well, there's 11 plus the 2 there.
They've been borrowed.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is kind of like a group that you're trying to form. Are you kind of trying to form a tribe out of people that don't know each other? Is that kind of what you're trying to do? And does that work?
One way of seeing it, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of temporary tribalism, I suppose. Yeah.
So, what my girlfriend is an academic speech therapist, and she recently told me about an experiment they ran at their lab, which is do newborn babies feel connected to people that look like themselves.
Right.
So in that sense, they have, and the result shows that that newborn babies pay more attention towards people and more positive attention towards people that look like themselves. So if you have, for example, someone from Asia and someone from Europe, and you sit someone from Europe next to him, so he will feel more tempted towards it. So in that sense, maybe we do have even predisposed in our genetic thinking, first of all, a tendency towards what we would nowadays call racism, right?
Yeah.
But maybe this sense of identity today in a globalized world has taught us that this is not kind of like the right temptation that we should follow on, but rather that we should build new alliances that are not based on any genetic predisposition, but rather on union of thinking, or what you say, are you trying to form here a group, and this group obviously is not let's say united by any genetic predisposition, but rather maybe by thoughts and willingness to communicate with other people.
But I mean, that in itself, that kind of like desire to socialise and find out what other people think, could that be a genetic predisposition?
Just to comment on what you've said, just using the example of the babies, just being attached to humans that look like themselves, isn't that a need for survival because their mothers and their parents are usually, because they share the same genetics, wouldn't they want to be like closer to their parents, and they would identify them, like they won't know how they look like, but just something similar. So wouldn't that be for the babies wanting to survive, because babies cry when they need to? It'll be like quite difficult for them, like, oh, I like this person based on their personality. Rather, it's more of like, do I get along well? Like, it's just, isn't that a need for survival sort of thing? Because
is it a survival instinct, this question, and is it they look more like themselves, or they look more like their parents? Because as you say, it's the parents they'll be looking out for.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty sure that the people who did these tests did thorough thoughts about that, and I mean, in the end, whether it's survival or not, I would say is irrelevant for, let's say, the outcome of the experiment. But effectively, what it tells us is, and I think this was double-blind tested with people that as well live in a different environment, and what it tells us is that at least there's some kind of feeling for, let's say, genetic differences that initially we would want to not be, let's say, present in our everyday thinking within newborns. And obviously and obviously there's a bunch of reasons why this can make sense, right? And I think as well, if you think of the ages where tribes were more prevalent, probably we dress like each other and so forth were helpful exactly for doing that. But I think nevertheless, in the end, what matters is rather what we make out of it when we are not only, let's say, based on our pure instincts.
So we don't actually have to follow the path of our genes, we can think above that, or, in a way, I think what you're saying is the results of that experiment mean that I guess we need to work out how to overcome some of these biases that we maybe all have. Rick, the TV's gone off. Anyway, but not wanting to.
Anyone watching this?
No, well, not right now because we're going to upload it later on, so it's not live. But as I was saying earlier on, you get people that watch it. It's surprising people, but not many. About 20. It's on our website, which is here, thepeoplespeak.org.uk. Obviously, if you're happy with us to do so. I mean, is it a question? I mean, is there a kind of this? about trying to overcome these biases because we don't want to. I don't know, what do people think? Do we want to try and overcome some of these biases, or is it just kind of that's how human beings are?
So I think at first people weren't willing to overcome these biases only because we're living together, we have the same mindset.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if somebody else is, we're not interested. But now that we live in a multicultural society, I think it's an important step to try and overcome these biases. Only because, you know, if you understand somebody, you're more able to socialize, and I think socializing is it's a big thing in the 21st century. You know, with all the technology and everything, even the idea of tribalism and the sense of community is mainly through online. So you're connected with people that you could never connect before, and I think that's quite important to try and overcome these biases.
Okay, so in a way we're talking about this kind of connection to people that look like us. We do want to overcome that, but I mean, how do we do it?
I think it's a testament to like the plasticity of the human mind, you know, because yes, people that have only, you can see that, you know, if you see people that have only grown up in a very kind of like homogenous and like not well travelled or very like, you know, environment, they're very different than people that have grown up in a like very multicultural area. And so it shows you that the human mind is able to kind of overcome those kind of like initial things, just not through some sort of intellectual exercise, but just because that's what happens.
So it's more when you experience.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an experience, kind of like learning, kind of like, do you know what I mean? That people just they just adapt to how they've grown up, and you kind of see that. I mean, you see kind of. I mean, I think it reflects on lots of things. If you because I live in a village basically, you know, an ex-coal mining village, you know, and like you kind of see there's a much more homogenous kind of culture, and you kind of can see that, and it's very different from living in London where I used to live, you know. So it's just a very different kind of thing that and it's just because the way the areas and the places and the environments that people live in. The interesting thing is when people come from one of those cultures to another, which happens a lot in London, I think. People that come like from a kind of rural village culture and then find themselves in the middle of London, and how they adapt to that. Usually it's their children adapt to it well, not so much the people that have moved from the villages, you know. I don't know what other people think about that.
All right, you're nodding on this side. So I guess the experience of living in London, is that its own kind of antidote to, you know, maybe this, you know, like you just by experience get to discover lots of different cultures. But what about those people living in the small villages? Does anyone know people like that?
My parents live in a small village of just 300 people. So it is very homogenous, but it's difficult because like I feel like traveling is enough of an antidote for that. Like just being in a different culture which might make you feel uncomfortable, but even I feel like maybe in the UK, even just like going to Scotland or going to Northern Ireland, it would be enough to kind of like open your mind, or possibly like when I came here, whenever I speak to the Londoners, it felt like it was a different country, because like it felt like Londoners didn't really go outside of London, and like they're like my friend's from Camden, and he was like, oh yeah, you know when the Amazon truck comes around, and we're like, the Amazon truck comes around, what?
So in a way, it's not just the people living in the village, it's the people that live in London often don't know what the experience of a village life is, and they don't.
I think to evolve, you need to be put in uncomfortable situations, and if you're in a small village, that's very limited. So in order to get over those predispositions or genetic predispositions that you have, you do need to be in more broad environment. And I think that's the only way you can overcome it.
But what can be difficult in a big city versus like a small village? In a small village, it's a lot easier to make connections. Just because like there's not that many people around, and also you tend to be friendlier, but in the big cities it's a bit less friendly, and there's just like so many people to connect with. It's like overwhelming. So that can like be a barrier sometimes moving from rural to cities. And it probably goes like the other way in city. Like when you're a city person, you move to the rural village, that you're like there's nothing to do, so you just like stay inside all day.
And everything happens very slowly as well. I notice. Any experience of this, Robin?
Well, I think it's as well a question of personality, whether you want to live in a big city or not. And often, I mean, obviously, sometimes people just stay where they are, and that's their new environment, their new normal. But nevertheless, we see movements in both directions increasing. So, meaning more people move from the city, relatively more people move from the city outside, but as well at the same time, more people from the outside move to the city. So overall, city is increasing, but that doesn't mean that more people do not move outside. And I think the reason for that is that in large and multicultural cities, I live in Berlin as well, there's a vibrant energy, and people typically love or hate Berlin. And those people who love Berlin tend to have as well, let's say, appreciation for more extreme, for diversity, for these kind of things. As I often joke, that's the only city in Germany I can live in. But then on the other hand, so many people are overwhelmed by that, are not feeling comfortable by having such a diverse environment, and as such, I don't think.
So is it kind of self-selecting?
I do think it's somehow self-selecting over time, and I mean, obviously, if you're born there now, I have a 9-month-old child who is now the Berliner. So the first, my girlfriend and me, we are not from Berlin, so he's always, let's say, used to this kind of environment, and obviously will be connected.
But will he be then fleeing to the village because it's too hectic in Berlin?
I mean, could be. Most likely, if we think at, let's say, personality types, me and my girlfriend, we definitely have tendencies towards extremes, so I believe that my son will as well. So in that sense,
it's a genetic thing.
I think you need whole genome sequencing done on you and your son and see what the variants are.
Well, let me explain the conversation, because we've kind of gone. So we start actually in the previous session. This is Talkaoke Freeform Talk Show. What's your name, by the way?
Vinny.
We got David, we got Rima, Zara, Anne-Marie, and Johnny, and Robin, and Mikey. And the moment we started talking about identity, and what part of your identity is actually genetic, and what part of it is cultural, is even the predisposition to be kind of a bit tribal. Is that a genetic thing?
We just monked that question once, and he said it's 79% free will and the rest is genetic. He had a specific figure on it. He had a specific number on it. Well, we were talking, I met this Buddhist chap at a bus stop once, and we just started chatting, and we talked about free will and genetics. How much is environment and how much is genetics? And he had a specific figure on it. He said 21% is genetic and 79% is free will. He had...
I'm confused by free will, because I would say...
now we're getting even more...
I'm puzzled, because I wouldn't make the difference between genetic and the rest is free will, because obviously there are quite some social influences that I wouldn't count as free will. Environment. Okay, that's... okay.
Okay, so
then I
79 to 21%. But anyway, let me finish that whole explanation, because the whole long...
This is at a bus stop in Clapham, by the way, if anyone wants to go there.
Well, this does actually fit in, because one of the things we're talking about is that sense of what makes you you, and the idea that somebody in the city has got this much more kind of multicultural sense of who they are compared to someone that lives in a village.
And you're lucky, I've got a friend from Hamburg, and their child is a hamburger. At least he's not a hamburger. Exactly.
Anyway, so that's where we are with the conversation. And where do we want to go with this? Do we want to talk about what makes us us? Do we want to talk about this question of like environment versus genes? Do we want to?
I mean, the one question going on to this, Robin was saying that people that live in cities are to a certain about self-selecting.
Yeah.
So then if that was true, then if you did some sort of like genome-wide association, you'd see a difference between people that live in cities. If it was a genetic thing,
Do you think it is?
yeah. Well, it might not be a genetic thing. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. It'd be interesting.
Are people in cities genetically different to?
I'll tell you what, though.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happens, because I live now up in the north of England, in Durham. All the kids in the north of England, all the kids that go to university in Durham or do well, or do well at school in the north of England, they go to London because that's where the jobs are. You know, so there's a certain kind of selection there for people that, you know, so there's going to be brighter people, quite frankly, in London. Whether that's a genetic thing or not, that's another question. But there's definitely a selection that's there that's not necessarily to do with preference.
The epigenetics, the environment that we're in all around us has an effect. So if we eat sugary foods, for example, our offspring, it will have an effect on our offspring. You saw the Dutch study after the Second World War, the famine study, where all the pregnant women, there was a big famine after the Second World War in Holland because the Nazis took all the food for themselves. And then immediately after the war, there was life of plenty. There was chocolate, food, everything. Those babies were born to believe that there would be a famine. So they all developed diabetes.
They had a kind of like...
They had an inkling.
A predisposition
so in the
to
same
accumulate
thing,
calories.
if you live in the city all the time, your child will be a city person. You know, will automatically.
But you're saying that's epigenetic.
It is epigenetic,
right.
yes. So our diet is epigenetic. So if you eat a lot of fat foods and go to McDonald's all the time, it's likely that your child too will have a similar taste.
Yeah.
I say that because they did this study in Japan where Japanese people went to California. The heart rate, the coronary heart rate disease was very low in Japan, but these Japanese migrated to Japan. They started eating hamburgers and living a California lifestyle, and within the same generation they too had the same heart disease rate as the local population.
Right, okay.
So
hang on,
all the time.
Hang on, let me just bring in these people. Sorry. Are you picking this up on this side? Do you believe in this?
So will affect your epigenetics now. So
I mean, is it in a way the environment and the genes in that sense are part of the same equation? Yeah. Anyone here like McDonald's?
They definitely, like you were saying, the epigenetics is definitely a big factor. Only if we think about Japan, if I were to go often, like twice a week, go like the fast food restaurants, so the lifestyle in Japan is more like lower calories, just more fitter. So if I do it in the same thing in California, to twice a week is so much. So I think it's not necessarily like it is epigenetics, but also there's
an environmental.
There's also more of like it's more for norm. I'm used to going twice to fast food restaurants. I'll do it the same in California without necessarily thinking about it much, sort of thing.
Also, a few weeks ago, we had a guy on the Talkaoke table who was an expert in McDonald's. He only ever eats McDonald's, based in Poplar, and apparently McDonald's is different in different countries as well. So maybe that's a factor. What were you going to say? We're talking about the we're still on fast food, which is what we started off with. We're talking about the epigenetics of fast food.
I mean, going on. What's your name? Is it
Vinny?
Vinny, yeah. Vinny was saying. I mean, it's known like for like, people from like Indian subcontinent that come to the UK are much more prone to diabetes and other things than the people that live in the.
They had a very simple diet. There was no meat in India.
Yeah.
People eat a very simple, healthy diet. They come here, all these sugary soft drinks and food, and
zero sugar. By the way.
But there's lots of other things in there which I won't mention.
Yeah.
But can you see it will? There's environment, there's genetics, and there's epigenetics. All three have an effect.
Okay, so is it? I mean, in a way, is it impossible to tease out what is what, or does it really matter?
I mean, just going back to that. I mean, there is this whole. I know this story about the Polynesian islanders that they thousands of years ago they rowed across the ocean, and only like the fattest ones made it because they're the ones that had enough fuel to like survive this journey. And they did okay, but then so they kind of have a selection there for that type of person. And then later on, when they made a lot of money out of the guano that was on these islands, and they became very wealthy. And then suddenly they started having lots of rich food and calories, and then their diabetes rate was like the highest in the world, like 50%. You know, because they had that. And the idea was it was that selection, that pre-selection for that type.
So those kind of diabetes
in Europe, the idea is that we haven't had that kind of long-term famine for such a long time that we've selected out we've lost those genes that are able to cope with that. Those same genes that are able to cope with famine are the ones that predispose you to diabetes if you have too much food. That's the kind of idea around it.
So in a way,
it's a genetic thing, but there's also, I'm sure, an epigenetic angle to it as well. Yeah.
We have about 1 million variants. So we have 6 billion base pairs in our genome. All of us have about 1 million variants. Now, 90% of those are probably coding for the same protein, so they're not that significant. But the rest will have some effect on our protein metabolism, our lipid metabolism, all the different pathways that exist. So yes, these variants will all affect us differently, and that's why we're all unique. We're completely unique.
Okay, well let's bring these people in on this side. What do you think about that? Like, in some circumstances, the genes that you've got are very useful, but then in other circumstances, when there's a lot of McDonald's around or other pineapple pizzas, we were talking.
Nuclear war and a chemical war, you see, it's like bacteria. 99.9% of the bacteria will die on the plate, but that 1 or 2 bacteria will survive, and they'll recolonize the plate. So we'll recolonize the planet with the few that survive.
Okay, so it's more likely those diabetes sufferers that will actually recolonize the planet.
A controversial proposition to you. That's something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
You know this coronavirus in China, right?
Yeah.
And the people that have died are the older people, right?
Yeah.
And it's very likely to spread across the whole world. Now, the world has got a problem of an aging population. We've got too many old people to look after.
Yeah.
So maybe the coronavirus would do us a favour.
About wildebeest, and that's what happens when the wildebeest getting eaten by lions. A young fit wildebeest always escape, but it's the old ones that get eaten by the lions, and it's
okay. Well, let's put it. I mean, what do people think on this side of the table? Is this virus almost like a kind of natural way of kind of rebalancing the demographics of our population? Is that what it's about?
Well, this is probably a very selfish answer, but it probably won't affect me that much because I only have one grandparent left.
Right, okay.
So it's not that much of a concern, but I mean, no, it's very cruel.
You don't need to be this cruel about it.
No, it's like, what is it? Was it Utopia, the BBC Three TV show where like they sterilized the whole world?
Yeah.
It's a bit like cruel.
Okay, so come and have a seat in a way.
About something purely from science.
Hang on a sec, Vinny. We've got a new face now. So we got what's your name?
Louise.
What was it?
Louise.
Louise. So we got Vinny, we got Robin, we got Johnny, we got Anne-Marie, we got Zara, Rima, and David and Mikey. And when we're sort of talking about, in a way, there's an element, I think, the idea of cruelty, because I think it's very important. Like Dave suggested that this coronavirus yes, it was him, suggested that the coronavirus could be a kind of natural rebalancing of the population, because we've got too many old people, whatever their sort of political views or whatever, too many old people to care for. But what Johnny was saying is that's a bit of a cruel perspective to have. But in a way, there's also this bringing in. I don't know if you've seen the TV program Utopia, bringing in a way this kind of fear as well, which comes with it, that scientists want to almost kind of manipulate the human population to.
Blade Runner, you were only allowed to live to a certain age, weren't you? And then you were bumped off. Yeah. And this was the whole film. He was being chased by.
I mean, are we a little bit paranoid about what science is doing, and
this could make this even worse. But like we got a very old cat. We got a very old cat. You know, and he was very bad kidney disease, and we had to have him put down. Last week, right? It was very sad. But I think the vet said, and we thought it was the best for him because he was not having a good life, right? But we don't do that with humans, do we? And then they end up living a long life of suffering.
So
do you know what I mean?
There should be a kind of euthanasia.
I mean, sometimes, I'm going to stop up now.
In my previous life, I did work in a hospital, and I did have one elderly lady who was 90 years old who said, "I want to die. I've lived my life. I'm in pain now. Can you give me something?" And I said, "I'm sorry, madam. I can't do anything. I have to. That's not my job. My job is to keep you alive, no matter what." So there may come a point when you're in your 90s that you're in a lot of pain and you've lived your life. She's got grandchildren. She settled everything. Everything is fine with her life. She had a wonderful life. She just doesn't want the pain anymore.
I think there's, just from a, let's say, cultural and historical perspective, there's this idea of sanctity of life. And obviously if we talk about scientific life, probably if we give it some sanctity, we should as well say that every animal has, in some sense, a sanctity. And in that sense, but I do think from a cultural perspective, we do make a difference here. And if we put that as a given, then there follows certain...
Okay, I'm going to say, Vinny, because we've got a potentially interested person. This is Talkaoke Pop-Up Talk Show where we talk about absolutely anything, and we're sort of talking about now euthanasia, weirdly enough. And should people have a right if they want to end their life? Is there something about sanctity of life? Is the coronavirus out there to kill off all the old people, to rebalance things? This is all. He's actually our aging expert. He's on the Society for Aging, but that's the way he sees it. But that's what we're talking about. So come and join. We've got Remo, we've got Zara.
Not standing, but I come back.
What's
but by all means, freedom of choice. No.
You think that people should be allowed to choose to die?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you shouldn't keep them alive too long as well.
Okay.
So the two.
Okay.
To court to actually get to have to do it. I think if a terminally ill cancer patient, the main thing is pain, isn't it? The reason why patients come to the doctor is a pain. If you're in a hell of a lot of pain and there's no treatment, they're living through hell. And there should be some way, obviously some humane, sensible, legal process by which they can go through. They shouldn't have to fly to other countries to get that treatment.
What do people think on this side of the table?
So is the question right now, should we be legalising euthanasia and be giving people the right to commit suicide if they were willing to?
I mean, I'm not saying we go to every hospital and anyone who just wants to die can die, but under strict controls in front of a judge.
So you would want to involve the legal side of it
because
as well?
It's not fair just to put this on the medical profession, because we have enough problems as it is without having to make these sort of decisions. I used to have managers from the hospital.
But isn't it the patient that's making the decision?
I used to have managers from the hospital saying, "Look, we have fewer beds left. Can you send a few patients home? Can you do this? Can we cut costs here?" I was in accident emergency. I was told, "Look, we can only take 5 patients tonight." I said, "What's your name?" I said to the lady, "What's your name? I will write that in the medical notes that you have informed the duty doctor that they cannot take any more patients than 10 because we have no space in the hospital." Then she backed off. She said, "No."
But, I mean, the point is there are a lot of pressure on medical services.
There would be a lot of pressure if you left it to doctors alone, because they're under a lot of pressure from the hospital management. But if it was done legally in front of a judge and it was done openly, transparently, where family could have a say as well, and if the patient really wanted to, it's in extreme circumstances only, it should be allowed. People shouldn't have to fly to another country, to Switzerland, to get justice.
Okay. Let me spread it out to this side of the table.
So, the case studies you've been showing are like people that are in pain that want to end their life, right? What happens if they wanting to end their life only because that's the only possible solution they're thinking about, right? If they probably just want to end the pain, and if there was no pain, they wouldn't mind. So what makes it legal? At what point that at this point it's legal for you to kill yourself. So, but for the judge to decide something that they haven't been themselves through, like I'm through lots of pain, I would like to kill myself.
So do judges understand pain?
They're obviously humans and they probably understand to some extent, but through a person that's probably on the... So, and then...
Okay, but I think that's the point, is like, you know, is the judge the right person to decide? You know, I mean, what about this question of other treatments that they may not have thought of?
You are just saying that we can't leave this for the medical professions alone, which I totally agree with. But at what point do we give the right to the judge for them to decide? You know, if the medical professions can't just only decide, and it's the judges, like, isn't that putting a burden on the judge?
The judge will have psychiatrist reports. Will have the patient will tell the judge the case in his own words why he wants to end his life. He will have the doctor's medical reports, yes, but ultimately it's the patient's choice, and the patient will put the case forward to the judge. If the judge feels he's a younger person, that there may be a cure in the future, that there could be alternative treatments abroad, then those will be better. But I'm saying a 90-year-old lady who's very frail and very elderly, who's in a lot of pain, who doesn't want to live, we are just prolonging her agony for a few more, which we did for another month.
Right.
She lived one more month, but you know,
not really doing
no
much
quality of life.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Okay, so what do other people think about this? To spread this out, you three have not said anything. I mean, what do you think about this? Is the judge the right person to make the decision? Do they do a better job than a doctor?
Yeah. I think a judge, definitely, just because you have aspects from every different medical profession and for it to all come together. And I do think it should be legalised.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We did this once with a woman who was a Jehovah's Witness who didn't want blood transfusion for her baby, and the baby would die, definitely, 100% would die. And the doctors went to court and the judge overruled the parents. The baby got the blood transfusion and the baby's fine, and the parents are happy now, but at the time the parents said absolutely not, we would rather baby die than have the blood transfusion.
Okay, interesting.
So just using that as an example, what happens if it's the opposite? So I say I want to kill myself and everybody's like, you shouldn't. The judge was like, yep, she's 90 years old, she's definitely, you know, but and then in the event that I do not like kill myself, and then I decide, oh, I actually want to live, you know, I have a new grandchild, and I've actually, so your example you gave earlier is like somebody younger versus somebody that's 90 years old. Isn't that you just being, necessarily you, but the example, isn't that just being ageist? We need places in the hospital, we could just get rid of the 90-year-old.
So you think it's more a question of resources than a question of rights, in a way?
Not necessarily,
resources
but
to heal people.
If you are going to allow people because of their age, they don't have much enough to live. She has a month to live. She's not going to have a good quality of life. We might just end her life here. You could be a judge, you could be a doctor, but what gives you that right? If she were to say, I would like to live, or if she's saying, I want to die just to get rid of the pain, sort of thing. That's what I'm trying to kind of say. Like, most people want to kill themselves, or just to end the pain, or to end something that's going through. So I do have a friend that's a suicide. She's a survivor, and the way. Yeah, she was going through a tough time, and she definitely wanted to kill herself, and we've all said no, you shouldn't, but you obviously can't do it here. By God will, she's survived and whatnot, and now she's quite happy and she finds herself in a happier position, right? She's not necessarily a happy person, but she's grown through the pain, and so the argument here is most people that want to kill themselves just want to end the pain. Who is the right person for you to say? So I think that's more for moral, and if you go back to our previous conversation, it's more for tribal, it's more the people you hang around with and who influence your ideas. For example, the idea of sanctity of life, and all of those things come to play. So people may not necessarily believe in God, would say, yeah, you just kill yourself, it doesn't really matter. But other people like your body's a temple, you should savor it, and so it's different ideas.
So there's so many values kind of tied up in this. It's a very, very kind of difficult.
It's a bit like a normal distribution. I mean, the majority of people I would say, were clinically depressed, or they had lost a child, or something had happened, or lost their job. Clearly, we're not talking about those people. We're just talking about a very small tail of patients who are... and the NHS does have a sort of cut-off point about 85. Once you get to 85, we're not as aggressive, shall we say, in trying to make
people better.
Well, because you're pumping very strong antibiotics into people and things like this. We are more respectful at that age. But I agree with you, it's a very fine line, and there's a grey area there, which is the reason why it has to be thought of very carefully. It has to be a judge, and it has to be transparent. In other words, everyone has to be there.
But I mean, I guess it's a question that people do have different values.
It shouldn't happen in secret. Well, the point I'm making is it shouldn't happen like happened with the Nazis, where it was all done in secret by one or two rogue doctors who just decided that all handicapped children should die and all these people should be just killed off because, to save money due to ideology. So it's a very difficult situation. It's not something you would take very lightly, but at that moment in time was a very difficult
I think what you're saying, Vinny, is there should be some kind of system in place to actually deal with these questions.
If a patient is over, say, 90 and there is no hope for them, and they're in a lot of pain and they're in a lot of distress. This woman couldn't breathe either. She had very difficulty breathing, and she was going to die. But the question is, we had to keep her alive no matter what. My instructions were, no matter what happens. It's
hard is it to look after people like that?
It's awful. I was trying to put cannulas into her arms and she was trying to pull them off because she didn't want to live. And so every day it was a struggle. You can imagine you've got 30 other patients to look after and you are traumatized almost by this poor patient who really doesn't want to live. And there's nothing you can do about it. Your job, you have to do your job. That's it. You have to keep her alive no matter what.
Louise, have you got any views on this? Because you're not so much. Don't have to say anything.
Yeah, no, I do have a view because recently, in the case of my father who had lung cancer, and in his last week of life, and I remember when we moved into the hospice, and he, up until that point, up until he got last stage of lung cancer, he was always, you do everything, you try everything, you never give up. But he got to the point where he wasn't going to get better, he was dying, and I remember when we got into hospice and he said, isn't there something they can just give me to end it? I just want to end it. And I mean, he lasted another week, but again, it was, it was very traumatic and for everyone around, and he would have, he knew the consequences and everything else, and in a case like that, when you're dying, there's nothing anyone can do, that's it, then at least die, the opportunity to die with dignity, I think.
I mean, who do you think could be responsible for making that decision?
I agree. It would maybe rather than one judge, a panel of judges perhaps, and then you get who get evidence in. But then I guess there's going to be the timeliness of that in terms of if it's going to take 3 months to process the claim, well then
I mean, in a way, it's got to be an instant thing in both of these cases. It's got to be happening within a week or a month or something like that.
I just think that thing that you said about dignity, that's what the vet said to us when we were saying about our cat, it's like the thing to do with dignity, and it seems like, why are we able to have dignity in the death of our pets but not in our family,
The NHS, you keep that patient alive, you feed that patient, there is no protocol at all for anything else. That's your job. You just got to do everything you can to help them.
I mean, obviously, a lot of the conversation here is about dealing with things like cancer, hopefully in a more successful way. But I mean, is that kind of principle being applied in terms of how we treat cancer and how, and the kind, what we put patients through?
Well, I think there is, a certain also, because a lot of the cancer therapies that people are developing now, like antibody therapies and so on, are very, very expensive. And some of them are not available on NHS. So in some ways, the NHS is kind of making that decision that they can't go as far as as possible. I mean, so there is those kind of decisions coming. There's sort of financial, economic decisions that are coming in.
As we're able to diagnose more patients, the burden then on the NHS is going to rise. So as we are improving genomics here, we're able to make better clinical diagnoses of cancers, and then of course, once we're able to do that, we then have to buy the antibodies for the treatments, and then of course it escalates.
So as the treatment becomes more sophisticated, it actually becomes more unavailable, and it leaves us with another problem.
I'll give an example of diabetic mothers. In the past, ladies with diabetes never had babies. They were not well enough. Now we've controlled their diabetes in diabetic clinics, spent billions of pounds. Now they are having babies. The problem there is they're having diabetic babies, and that puts an increased burden on the NHS. Now they're able to have children.
So in a way, it's like the costs breed more costs.
Exactly. So you've cured one problem, which is great, which is fantastic. These women now have normal lives, but now they have normal lives, they want to have a family, and that then increases costs on the NHS again.
Let's spread this out to this side of the table. What do you think about this? I mean,
I think that's kind of a dangerous argument. It's sort of like the arguments they had around CRISPR-Cas9 when that was first discovered about like designer babies. It sort of gets into the eugenics. If you're like, these people shouldn't have. You weren't saying that this way, but you were saying.
Mothers have to come into hospital much earlier than their term date, and they become ill. They have to rely on GP services far more when they're pregnant. All I'm saying is that those are unforeseen costs that the NHS wasn't originally conceiving when they first had a diabetic program for these women.
I mean, I'm sure. Go on.
Even if they wouldn't be unforeseen, I think what you're stating is just the focus on there are economics to it, because you didn't put any value on it whether that was right or not, and I think we all agree helping these patients is obviously right, and as well empowering them, it's obviously right. But nevertheless, I think we always have this ambivalence when we talk about health. Health is in some sense as well an economic thing, and we do have to somehow, let's say, distribute the resources we have to help as many patients as we can, and that obviously gives us up these conflicts. I mean, we can look at other ones when we think about this. Who do we help?
But do you treat 20 patients with kidney dialysis and help them to live, or do you treat one cancer patient with with very, very expensive chemotherapy, so they may live an extra year? So this is the sort of debate that you have: the quality of life and how many years that patient's going to live.
I think. Let me just try and bring some more people. I mean, obviously there's limited resources when it comes to healthcare. How do you actually? Who do you give the money to? How do you make sense of this? Is it just a question of writing a bigger check, or will that just lead to more people surviving, needing more healthcare? What do people think on this side of the table?
I think when it comes to like healthcare and things, it's kind of more like every doctor or scientist has blinkers on, in a way, blinders on. You're focused on your problem and you don't really see what can come from that, fixing that problem, which is kind of what you were saying. So you fix something, but then a million other problems come out of that. So it does make it really hard to know where to allocate money, to if you should put more money in or if you should distribute what's already there. So I do think it's a really huge and difficult, very difficult.
You get the treatment.
So it's not even consistent.
Another area you will not get the treatment. It's terrible.
I think it's as well a question of how can we debate about that, because typically, as soon as we start talking about economics, we face these philosophical questions that are unsolvable, and as soon as you raise them, it's often this: how dare you ask this question, how dare you make even a suggestion on how to decide whether to treat this 1 versus 20, because it's this inhuman question that you need to ask. On the other hand, not asking it is as well inhuman, because it doesn't solve the problems that we are facing, and it's obvious that we have always, regardless of in which terms we improve, regardless how much more we focus on better treatments earlier, we still have this problem of a limited amount of resources for more demand, and so balancing this off in a right and humane way is necessary. And I think, first of all, allowing a community to discuss as well about these economics in a time of for questions that are primarily philosophical is crucial.
Okay, let me just go to David.
What I was going to say was this, coming back to my original point about coronavirus. It might be a blessing in disguise for the NHS. Do you know what I mean? My short-term pain, long-term gain.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. but I mean, I think you're right. When we got such a large population in a global world, and these are and yet, like you're saying, patients and families are much smaller scale. There's this kind of conflict. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do not want my mother to get coronavirus. I absolutely don't. You know what I mean? But
also, you're making an assumption that a given virus will only attack the old and the weak. There was previous cases of where flu, it wasn't just attacking. In fact, the old seemed to be immune to it, and the theory was it was a virus that had circulated a long time ago, and it was much younger people that were coming down and being killed by it. So, it's too indiscriminate. So,
I mean, what about this question?
Advocating.
What about this? Obviously, we all want to spend money on health, and maybe we're not spending enough money on health. I mean, maybe these are the things.
Say you were told you had prostate cancer, and the treatment would cost over £1 million. They have specific treatment for you in the United States. If you had the £1 million, you could go, but it was not available in the NHS. You would be furious. You would say, "Look, I've paid my taxes, I've paid my national insurance. I should receive that treatment."
a colleague of mine, her husband's got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He's a young guy, 38 years old, got 2 young children, so it's kind of like a tragic situation. And he's done a crowdfunding thing to try and get money. He's already raised about 30k, to try and get money to try out these therapies that aren't available to him. So,
is he going to America? Or
I think it's some sort of American trial or something like that. I'm not sure the details, but I mean that really brings it home when you get that situation. Of course, that's what you would do. Anyone would do the same, So it's difficult.
Are we spending enough money on health? It is obviously something we're all quite concerned about. So obviously there's a philosophical side, but I mean, have we got to that point where we
spend far less than the United States does per capita on health? We spend about a quarter. So that puts into perspective how much our government's spending as opposed to the Americans. So it gives you...
I think, there are two questions to it. Are we spending enough, and are we spending them right? And I think that's what we have to optimize it. And typically when it comes to optimization, some kind of models or let's say values for what do we optimize for are very helpful. And I think that's exactly the difficult question that we have here, because as soon as I say we should optimize for X, someone else says, but what if this case happens? What if your mother? But nevertheless, we need to derive them.
In London, you should receive the same protocol. It shouldn't depend on where you live or where your local authority has the money or doesn't have the money. It should be level for the whole country.
Okay, we've got a new face to the table. So this is a new old face because you were here earlier on. Basically, we're talking about kind of euthanasia. Should we let old people die? And then there's a question about how do we allocate our... Robin, give us a final thought before you go. Always like to get a final thought.
So one final thought as a summary to this table. First of all, I joined here when there were far less, and loved the vibrant community. I loved the thoughts, and my final advocation is let's allow difficult questions that touch as well upon, let's say, questions like sanctity of life as well to be addressed in a way that we talk about economics and bring these, let's say, philosophical and real-world problems together in order to solve problems and help patients and not just advocate for individual.
It's clearly a discussion that we need to have because Vinny's having these problems at work.
I did have.
Are you not working there anymore?
I'm doing a PhD in genomics now.
Okay, so you're not.
But this is what I used to face every day, having to go into work, knowing this very difficult patient didn't want to live, and basically fighting her. So it was awful for me. So
there's that question about whether people want to live and what treatments they want, but also the question of how do we allocate health resources, and are we kind of spending a bit too much on the later stages of life and not maybe doing things earlier on. I don't know. I feel like you're shaping up to disappear, but we want a final thought. We want a final thought from you before you go. So give us a final thought from. Well, you don't have to do one if you don't want to, but that's normally how we do it.
I don't have any opinions.
Are we allocating health resources in the right way?
I mean, like, how long is a piece of string? It's very difficult.
I mean, okay, so Robin came up with this idea that we need to design a protocol. Do you agree with that? That it's kind of fair that we all agree on a way to allocate it at least?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Because medically, it's not distributed in this country fairly, in a sense. So where my cousin lives, they have a lot of immunisations just piled up because there's not a lot of people. But in my area, there's so many people that they have a shortage. So people are on waiting lists for these immunisations, where it doesn't make sense how it. It doesn't make sense.
So there's a little bit of inconsistency going on there.
Yeah.
Zara, final thought?
I think that we're trying our best to like allocate as much as we can, and obviously you can never keep everyone happy. It's really hard to make sure that everyone is involved, but I guess eventually with time, maybe, hopefully, it would work.
Okay, so you believe that in the fullness of time we'll work these things out?
Yeah, hopefully, if we go to the right direction and if we use our resources better, maybe,
So, just an overall, my opinion, I think 21st century, we've got great genomics, we've improved our technology so much that we've had more people surviving. So I think for 21st century, we need 21st century solutions. We need to just, the NHS is not getting enough funding, and even if it is, it still isn't, okay, because there's too many people and we should be, like Robin said, answering the right questions in the right direction.
Okay, so, I mean, how do we make these decisions about how we allocate these resources?
See, with that, I think that is a matter of principle, and I think that's more of like who is right, who is wrong. So the question is, what is morally right, what is morally wrong, who do we give? Is it a judge, is it a doctor, or is it a family member, or is it myself, you know? So with these questions, I think it's more, you wouldn't get a definite answer. Two different people can answer two different questions. It's like both sides of a coin. One's a yes, one's a no. So it's really vague. And broad concept we can go with. So yeah.
Okay. Can we live in that state of vagueness? I know you're going, but that's just a question for the rest of the table. Thanks, guys, for that. And we've got a new face. You've got to replace 4 people, or 5 actually. 6.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. Give us a final thought before you go.
Getting it back to genomics, I guess, in terms of maximising people's quality of life rather than length of life, and using what tools we have to make things better, and maybe in terms of predicting, and if there's using genomics can mean that we can intercede and start treating people, and so that they have a better quality of life.
It could actually end up being cheaper in a way.
Exactly, than having to, if you can sort of prevent or them getting cancer or whatever in the first place, then the amount you would save in the long run. So that would be my idea, how genomics can help to improve people's quality of life.
Even though it's looking quite expensive now, it might end up being quite cheap.
There's cheaper ways of doing genetic testing.
Sequencing. I mean, when the iPhone first came out, it was extraordinarily expensive. Now every kid has it.
Expensive.
Well, even my little nephew, who's like 8 years old, has a brand new one.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a whole debate in itself.
He's got a better phone than I have. So. But the point I make is that the price of it will come down in time, and if genomic testing gets down to, say, £100 a shot, then I think most people will say yes, we're prepared to go to our GP, spend £100 and have our genome tested. We need the tools though. I'm at Imperial College and we're working there on a model, on disease models and variants, and working out which variants are causative for the mutations. So in the future, hopefully, we will be able to give risk factors for high cholesterol, for example, before the patient even has high cholesterol. You'll be able to see the markers for high cholesterol and predict. So prevention is better than cure. So
how would that help prevent?
Well, because I will be able to say to you, your diet needs to change because you're predisposed to getting high cholesterol. You don't have it now, but you have the biological markers for it.
Okay, well, let's bring in this new person. What's your name?
Terry.
Terry Steele. This is David. This is Vinny. I'm Mikey. Come and join if you want. Bring your tea over. don't worry, it's not a particularly taxing conversation. We're just talking about life and death. So, well, I mean, we were coming on to it. Anyway, I guess at the moment, what we're kind of talking about this. The money, we're talking about the money and spending the money, really.
But I think the big challenge in genomics, you kind of alluded to this, was like bringing it down to it's something that when you go to your GP, it's a genomics conversation, or the GP can understand what the genomics is.
Chemist now, and you can have your cholesterol checked, or you can have your blood pressure checked, or you can have you go to the chemist and have your blood sugar checked. So in the future, surely a pharmacist will be able to have a small bench where he will have a sequencer, and he will be able to check your sequence. The great thing about that is he will be able to tell you the medication you're on, whether it's the right medication or the wrong medication. We're finding statins, for example. There was a study done where all these patients were not having any effect on their statin. Their cholesterol was sky high. They did genome testing on. They all found one particular variant. So it means that in this population, some patients are receiving statins of no use whatsoever. So it'll help in that, and then that file they can keep on a UBS stick. They can take it to their GP, and their GP can send it off to a genomics company, and they can.
Hang on a second. Let me bring Terry into this as well, because
let them have the conversation.
Have it out. Okay, you're just listening, but do feel that if you want to attract my attention.
Look, but right, say for that example of a patient that doesn't respond to statins, right? The sort of devil's advocate argument would be, well, you could tell that because their cholesterol's still high, so therefore they don't respond to statins. So why does it matter whether, you know what I mean? That's what
I'm just giving that as a study, but in the future we're going to have personalised medicine. The idea being is that pharmacologically everyone is unique, and some people don't respond to beta blockers or salbutamol, things like this.
Yeah.
So all of those patients will have designer drugs made for them, or GlaxoSmithKline will have a selection of drugs available.
A menu.
A menu.
Yeah.
So they'll have a flavour of salbutamol that will be suitable for that particular patient. Now, there's no harm in that, and that'll be better. We're improving healthcare.
It's better than the trial and error way of trying somebody on a drug.
And then trying a different drug.
Yeah,
I used to have this problem with warfarin, where patients were put on warfarin for thinning the blood, and they'd be in hospital for 2 weeks because we couldn't get the warfarin level right. And the reason is because they were warfarin resistant. We didn't have the genetics at that time to be. Now, if you have the genetics, I could say this patient is warfarin resistant. I'm going to put them on a different drug. They'd be out within a day.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is genomics can actually save a bit of money. Yeah.
Right. So I was actually talking to a rheumatologist who was saying you've got.
Is that just a rumour? Sorry.
So someone comes in with rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
You've got a window in which to treat them. If you don't get them treatment in that window, if it's a few years, then you won't treat them, right? And there's about 4 or 5 different treatments for rheumatoid arthritis, but each one only works in like 20-30% of patients. So you basically got to go through them one by one until you find the one that works for that patient.
Yeah.
So if there's a way to immediately go to the right patient.
But I'm saying there is a selection of drugs which could be, optimised for patients.
Is it always about the genes, the reason why they don't work? Can you always tell genetically?
Yes, because I tell you why. Because now what we're doing is something called luciferase assays. Have you heard of this? What you do is you use CRISPR to infect the breast cells, for example, with a particular mutation, and then those cells then produce BRCA1, and they show exactly how much they produce. They're phosphorylase, and if they produce, say, 90%, it means you've got a higher risk of breast cancer. Those patients that had a very high risk were only producing 50% of the protein. So you can now test the variant with the protein production and see how much protein it's producing.
Okay, I also want to bring Terry. Are you okay? Yeah. These two can go all day.
No, but the BRCA mutation is actually quite an interesting example, because I think people when they first found this, okay, you can tell straight away if someone's got, predisposition to breast cancer or other cancers. But actually, they found that there's quite a few people with the BRCA variants that don't have developed cancer. So you need these other levels of assays on top of it.
So they did a study of 10,000 women, 10,000 without breast cancer, 10,000 with breast cancer. They genomed the BRCA1 gene, and they found about 30 different variants in the breast cancer patients. They then assayed those 30 variants, and it's from those 30, only 5 actually were clinically significant change in the BRCA gene. The others are just due to linkage disequilibrium and just confounding factors. Remember, we have a lot of variants. Not all of those because the sample size isn't big enough, not all those variants are significant. But those variants that significantly reduced BRCA1 were the ones that we are now using in our model. We've created a disease model for breast cancer, for high cholesterol, for diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Now, all these conditions are useful that they can be treated in advance. So if you're like to get type 2 diabetes, it's late onset. 90% of diabetics get this. So you can say to somebody, you don't have diabetes yet, but your risk factors are there because you have the variants that have reduced the protein production of those proteins that are required for a good glucose metabolism. Because you don't have that level, you have that variant, you have a higher risk of getting lung.
How do the patients respond to this information?
Well, I haven't tested it in clinical situation yet. This is a research.
Just in the lab.
This is in the lab. This is my PhD project actually. So this is in the lab. But wouldn't it be great if there's 2 modes to this? You can go to a patient and say, look, there are 6 diseases, I can give you the risk factor for each disease. Or you can do a disease search where you look at one disease, like breast cancer, and you get the top 10 patients in your database that have highest risk of getting that disease. And you bring those patients in, and perhaps they should have more regular mammograms, for example, for those higher risk patients. Would you do it with a prostate, or would you do testicular cancer? If your father had testicular cancer, he had the gene. The good thing about this system is you don't need a reference because we're using studies that have been done. But if you had a reference, say your father died of testicular cancer, and you had his blood saved in the hospital, and you tested positive for that same mutation, then you would. If you'd had children, then perhaps you would say yes. Okay, I've had 3 children. I will have, and you. Once there's all these different size balls. I don't know whether you've seen this on a ring.
No,
and they're testicular size, and you can get plastic ones. As a medical student, we were intrigued when the lecturer brought this. It's like a set of keys almost, and it's got different size balls in. And he said, "You never guess what this is?" And none of us were all stumped. And he said, "This is the different testicular size balls we use to put into the patient back in. So we have to assess the size of them with one hand with his balls, the other hand testing
what feels right.
What feels right, and that's the size we give them."
Okay. Maybe we can bring in Terry on this one. We're talking about, I guess, this question. Would you, if you found, you've explored your own.
I would like to go back to that risk assessment, and then, as a doctor, providing advice for the higher risk patients. You're a doctor, right?
Yes.
Or
I'm now doing research. I was for many years.
You've been trained as a medical student. Would you also do the reverse? So keep the people with a lower risk, despite that BRCA1 mutation, out of the hospital?
The other thing is that some assays, some variants actually increase the level of BRCA1, and those patients don't have breast cancer, and their risk of breast cancer will actually be lower.
So would you advise them not to get a mastectomy if they've got symptoms, or would...
Well, if they've got symptoms, then yes. Then if the mammogram shows they've got symptoms, So the idea here, this is a screening process. So what we're basically doing is we will genome everybody. In the future, everyone, you go to your GP, he'll take a bit of saliva from you, he'll genome you.
You can just do that when you're born. You can get it when you're born.
Yeah. I mean,
preferably
we had a panel earlier on today that said no, we don't want this happening. Because there's a lack of understanding, a lack of trust, and to be frank, a lack of knowledge of what the potential possibilities.
It's a chicken and egg situation. If we don't have this clinical data that Biobank are creating, if we don't have the mutation data, what I need to see is the mutations and the clinical data. You need to put them side by side and then process that information and see which patients have a large liver, for example, check with their liver function test and check with the genetics. So you want to put all that. Genetics is just an extra.
So what you're talking about is exactly what we need, is clinicians that understand genomics and genetics. But the number of those is pretty small, right?
One.
We've got one here.
As genomics becomes more powerful, once we've got these disease models, I spent 3 weeks on each disease just doing research, looking at the molecules involved, seeing all the papers around the world that have described the pathology of the disease. What are the proteins involved in this disease? What are the molecules involved? How does this disease, which pathways? There are about 10 different pathways, all intermingling with each other, that cause diabetes. Now then you have to go back and look at the assay data and see which of these proteins, which variants, and which proteins are being downregulated. And then only can you create a proper model. It's not a foolproof model because you've got epigenetic factors as well, and of course environmental factors. You may have ate at McDonald's all your life, so your cholesterol may be high, but it may not be due to your genetics, or it may be due. But all we're doing is looking at the genetics for the time being. So
there is an issue there. Like if you're saying like 3 weeks for each gene, you know, it's a huge amount of information to process. Like I do my research on nematode worms, C. elegans worms, and I've been working on it for like 20 years, you know. And people come to me. We've actually got a company where we offer C. elegans research services to people, right? And so someone comes to me with a problem, you know, and then I kind of
what sort of problem do they come to you with?
They say, I've got a drug. We're trying to. I can't really disclose all this stuff, but they're trying to have a drug to do this or do that. A lot of it's like, and they want to have a quick look in nematodes to see if they can understand the mechanisms and stuff. So I kind of like draw on my like knowledge bank and look up the literature about particular genes, and you know, over the years you kind of know where to look and you know how to interpret all that literature. So that's kind of what you're saying a doctor will be doing. But you know, in the GP with their 10-minute appointment, you know, they're not going to do that. So how are we going to facilitate that?
Okay. So hang on a sec. Let me just. So the question is, how can we expect a GP to understand like all the intricacies of genomic medicine?
You would have specialists in genomic medicine, I think, in hospitals. There have to be specialists in this field, and patients who the GP is only doing a screening process. So basically, 95 or 98% of all the patients going through the screening process will be fine. So it's only a small percentage that will need further investigation, will need further information. It's those patients that will
so it wouldn't be the GP that would be the specialist here, or be the advisor. Anyway, look, we've got new faces to the table. We've got Vinny, we've got David, we've got Terry. I'm Mikey. What's your name?
Ben.
At the moment, we're sort of talking. We've got a rare and remarkable thing here in Vinny, who's a physician that's actually become a specialist, a research specialist in genomic medicine, and actually how to actually make it happen. I mean, normally, I have to say, on these Talkaoke sessions we do at Festival of Genomics, everyone goes, "Where's all the clinicians? Where's all the clinicians?" But we've actually got one here today. Although you've now become a researcher.
I have, but I worked on the wards for 11 years, so I've got a fair amount of experience as what patients face day to day. My aim is to get to the root of the problem, because the genetics is actually the root of what's causing these cancer and causing these different conditions. If we can have this predictive value where we can predict things in advance, rather than you getting high cholesterol and you getting heart disease, if we can say to you at the age when you're born, even, you know, when you have a heel prick test, all children, babies have this test done. You could just take one or two. You could take a little bit of that blood and do a genome test on it. It'll give you a reference then for that future in life.
Yeah.
And then you could check, say if he develops cancer, for example, later on in life, then you've got a reference from when he was a baby. So it's a perfect time. And I'd like to see longitudinal studies done throughout the whole of somebody's life, so that we know when he had his first problem. We know if he's had his tonsils out. I know if he's got liver pain in his liver, for example. If he's had gallstones before. When he's had gallstones, did his liver function tests go up?
Okay.
Did his CRP go up? His inflammatory markers? What I'm saying is there's so many, the more information we can have about
So you're
a patient,
very hungry for patient data and patient information
as much as we
from
can.
the moment of birth, if not before.
Well, if not before. We don't do amniocentesis anymore, so it wouldn't be before.
Yeah.
But certainly when a baby's born, there is no harm. You're not taking any more blood. You're just using the same sample.
Okay.
And you could do these tests.
We've got a new face to the table, so we've got Ben that's not said anything yet. We've got Terry that's not said very much. And then we've got David that said quite a lot, and Vinny that said even more. And basically what you're saying is we just
data, we will never get that information.
Come and have a seat.
Cure these problems.
Yeah.
We had guinea pigs. We had people in the NHS who gave their blood, who gave their organs to medical science 20 years ago. So now we're reaping some of the benefits of those, where we're getting antibody treatments for cancer. We're getting new treatments that were never available before.
So in
But
a way,
it's the
this
sacrifice of
genetic
those-
information
Yes.
is a kind of donation to the common good.
It is. And when I was a medical student, all the elderly patients donated their bodies, for example, so that we could cut them up and look at them. And that bred a generation of new doctors. And it's the same thing here. We need that blood. I know you can say we don't get consent of baby, we don't have this consent, we don't have that consent. In the future, you don't have to give consent for organs, for example. In the future, you'll be able to, in some countries, that's the case now. But it is the common good.
So you're hungry for this data. Okay, what's your name?
Oh, hi, I'm Jamal.
Jamal, this is Ben, Vinny, David, Terry, and Mikey. I guess at the moment we're kind of talking about these things like Vinny's definitely is doing a lot of research, but you feel that I guess the NHS should build up this genomic database of all babies as they're born.
We're not Nazi doctors. When I was a medical student, there was research done, they did tests on hypothermia, for example, the Nazis. The question was then, should we use that research for the good of patients with hypothermia, or is it unethical to use that data because it was done by using Jews in concentration camps? Dr. Mengele, very famous case. And it was a very difficult decision. But here, we're not Nazis. All we're doing is using that blood for the benefit. I mean, obviously safeguards have to be put in place. This has to be done ethically and with full permission and everything else. But I still think that patients will be more than willing, as you saw with the biobank patients, people are willing, if they have a disease or even if they're well, to help the medical profession, to help future generations.
Let's go around the table on this. What do you think? Should we actually be doing this?
I think we should. I think there's practicalities around the current systems, what systems will allow to happen at this stage.
What are the practicalities?
Well, so we obviously, we've actually, there's things around consent and being clear on what the rules are there, but there's also...
Anyway, let's let Ben finish what he's
saying. I think I support the idea of what you're talking about, but I'm involved in the sort of piecing together the systems in terms of test management, test ordering. So at the moment, we're just not equipped to cover that level of scale, but we're working towards that. So in a few years' time, I think it'll be possible, but technically at the moment, it's...
Okay, so it's even just, is that storing the data or storing the blood? Or?
It's the throughput of the data, so it's having it, the backlog of analysis.
Electronic patient record now, in our GP service, they've been having it for the last 10 years. Everything is electronic, and there's absolutely no reason we could not add genomic data to that and then have a complete relational database. So I would like to. Our local GP's got about 10,000 patients. Wouldn't it be great if you do a whole genome sequence on all of those patients, and we had the clinical data? I mean, the names would be anonymized. I don't need to know who the name of the person is or where they live or anything else. All I need is.
Well, you do when you find out they've got a mutation.
Yeah, sure. But that could be handled by somebody else. If you're doing research into the subject, what you want is just the data. The name of the patient and other information can be stored elsewhere with somebody else. But what you want is just the data.
Jamal, have you got a view on that?
I mean, what you've just said, I would go along with. But the original version of it, perhaps not so. We talk about consent, for the sake of consent. The issue, obviously, but then I do as a clinician comes in when, obviously somebody's carrying a mutation for a fatal condition, then it's like a double jeopardy. If you don't tell the patient, you're in trouble. If you tell the patient, you're in trouble. That part would be fine.
Hang on. Jamal,
that part would be fine as long. I wouldn't mind if we just have random samples, and that's holding back research. If there are blood samples that it's going to have no impact on anyone. We have no data, but if you could only knock people's heads together, usually these people sit on committees. They would never let you get away with that, would they?
I guess the point is, like, say you find this random mutation on an anonymous sample, somebody out there has got this lethal mutation.
Yes.
What do you do then? Okay.
I've got this, I know, like, ideally everyone would know all their genome, have access to all their own data, but then you have this issue, like you're saying, with the GP's got very little time, and they really have this problem of, like, people Googling their conditions and coming up to the GP, so, like, I've got all these diseases. Yeah, exactly. So Google works well for medicine, but you have to do it in the right, but then,
you have to know how to Google.
But then you say, like, what if the patient comes in and said, oh, I've got this really bad, proline to alanine substitution in my insulin 3 receptor, and I'm also worried about how that might interact with the ApoE mutation I've got on my, and then the GP's like, what?
Because I've got a model of.
Okay, I'm just going around the table to find out what people think about this kind of almost compulsory genetic data gathering for babies. Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, the last point sort of adheres to a problem I see with taking the data away from the patients, from the people, anonymize them, use them for research, and then not bring the results back.
When the mother leaves the hospital on a small chip, you give the mother all the blood results, all the genomic data. You give her everything, okay? And then the family can decide later on in life if they want to give it. If they want to give it to scientists, they can. If they don't want to, they can keep that data themselves. In that way, it solves the problem of consent, because it means that the family.
So what are you saying, Vinny? That you don't actually take that data, you just give it to the mother, and it's not on the main database.
It's not on the main database. It's their own personal information.
And then they choose later on whether to.
Just like when you go to 23andMe, you get the whole genome sequence for yourself. You can decide whether you want to take that to have it checked, the diseases, or whether you would just want hereditary information, or whether you're Icelandic or not. You don't have to have it tested for diseases if you don't want to.
It could just be tested for Icelandicism.
Exactly.
Okay.
No, just quickly. I think that's possibly too convenient. I know you're enthusiastic about getting the data, but it's like going to McDonald's, and it's like when you spend £20 in Tesco, you get a voucher. So that I think there would have to be a process for them to apply individually. Somebody could steal the data. Somebody under the influence of something might make.
Hang on. I'll come to your point in a second. Let's just get a final point from Ben. Vinny, give me a second.
I like the idea of people owning their own data. I think that's.
Is it just on a USB stick that they can choose to plug in later on? Is that? Do you see that as a?
You mean as opposed to being owned, held by another company or some
held
organisation?
somewhere else. It's literally something that's kind of almost.
Well, I think that technology challenge of people owning their own data and where that's stored is something that could be solved, right? People can own their own storage as well, and there can be solutions for that.
So it could be, So it doesn't have to be literally physically separate from that. Okay, Vinny, it's your go now. Thank you, Ben.
In America, we're
okay. Let me just another. Sorry, it's not your go. Yeah, final thought.
So I don't think it does solve the problem if you separate the data from the individuals. So if you say they need to donate at a certain point their data to research, then it's gone. And what you would actually want to do is the patients or the individuals to participate in the actual research.
Okay, let me get a final thought. Thank you, Terry. Final thought from Jamal, and then we'll come to you. Probably we need a final thought, then I'm going to get a drink because I've talked too much. Go on.
I think walking home with a USB, there'll be probably even new fancy versions of that. They'll probably send it to your watch or to your iPhone.
Yeah.
That might just be, whatever, they stick it in your head or something. But I think that might just become too tempting for people, under the influence of a couple of glasses of wine, they do something silly. So I think we have to, having the data, exactly. So you'd have to make it more formalized than that, which is probably what you want anyway.
Yeah.
The point I make is that when the first heart transplants occurred in London, there was riots in the streets of London. Yes, because people really thought that if you transplant somebody's heart into... Now, you think this is amazing now, but it's purely because we didn't understand the physiology of the body at that time, and people really believed that if you gave a heart of a murderer to a patient, that patient would then become a murderer.
Right.
People genuinely believed this, and there were genuine riots in the streets of London, and there was a huge debate about it. Now, the same thing with test tube babies. There was a huge debate about test tube babies. Should we be fertilizing eggs outside the womb? It's completely unnatural. Completely, but now it's commonplace. There are IVF clinics everywhere in London. It's like going to get a pizza or something. It's that common.
Again.
But the point I make is that perhaps in 10 years' time, in America, people sell their genomic information like they sell blood. In America, it's a free-for-all. If you have an interesting condition, or if you're normal, you can go to your GP and say, look, I want my genome. I want you to do all these tests on me. I want $1,000
How much
or $2,000.
About $2,000.
It's a commercial proposition, so people actually will happily sell, and you can go then to databases and buy this data. It's purely commercial. Can you believe that? We're arguing about consent of babies and things like this, but in America, people happily sell.
Babies?
You can sell anything. Look at Michael Jackson. You can buy anything.
Right. Okay. Well, I feel like we're kind of coming to a close, so maybe it's just time to get final thoughts. Thank you, Jim. You've kind of given your one, and if you want another bite of the cherry, do you want a final thought?
No, I think sort of, buying and selling over the counter again. I have to disagree with Vicky again. People buy and sell organs through desperation, but that's not right. But this blockchain genomics, that's based around the idea that you can. That's where you do share in the profits, which is fair enough.
Okay, so you could incorporate it into a blockchain that would mean that research somehow you get a trickle down of funding from that.
That's how some companies are working. That's a model of one company.
Model. You could donate all your data to a database. When people look at that database, they pay a fee, and it's a non-profit making database, and that money could come to the recipients.
Give us a final thought, Vinny.
But it's a bit like sperm. Once you've given your sperm, I suppose it's very difficult to sort of get it back. You don't know who's using it. No, when I was a medical student, I was asked, because I was very low on funds, and the hospital said, we're looking for donors, but I didn't volunteer. I only donated blood, which doesn't pay anything. But,
right. Okay.
Yes.
So in that case, you didn't give to the greater good.
I didn't. No.
Okay.
I was too embarrassed.
Okay.
It's the method by which it was collected, I think, was embarrassing.
Final thought?
I think it's a really tricky one, but it's something that we have to eventually get to grips with, and I think it requires a lot of education. Because I think it requires Yeah. No, but also I think one thing that we touched upon is like it's not just the clinicians that need to be educated; it's the people. We need to know what it means, what it is, what DNA even is, or how it works. There's so much, and schools they have to teach it in schools early. You know, all that kind of stuff.
You think there should be a genomics class in school?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Criminal activity where rapists and murderers are being caught now. There was one guy who was whose daughter was done for speeding. They did a DNA test on her, and they found out that a near relative committed a rape 20 years earlier, and it was either her uncle or her father, and her father's now in jail, serving life in jail for that rape that happened 20 years ago because his daughter had a DNA test. Now that's the power of genomics.
You need to test someone for their DNA for speeding.
Speeding, and she had an altercation. She had an altercation with a police officer.
Right.
She was arrested, and her DNA was checked.
Right.
Now this might be like for a whole other conversation, right? I'm just going back.
Probably because
we're wrapping up. But like, you know, my daughters at primary school, all they do is do spellings and arithmetic. They should do genetics and genomics from like year 5. Why
If it began with R, it would be reading, write, because you can't have reading, writing, arithmetic, and genomics. It doesn't fit. You need to come up with something beginning with R.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that one.
Yeah. All right. That's for the next session. But thanks to everyone for this session. Yeah. Thanks for contributing. We will be back.